Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining the webinar today, the Facilities Business Case Playbook, How to Win Executive Buy-in. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. We have Nico Viola, Director of Facilities at Holden Forests and Gardens. We have David Munns, Interim Executive Leader and Healthcare Operations Consultant, and Eric Swindle, Vice President of Facility Operations and Engineering at Space Center Houston. And of course, our moderator today is David Trask, Senior Director of Customer Education and Success at ARC Facilities and host of the Facility Voices podcast. Happy to have all of you here today. And David, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for joining. And Nico, David, and Eric, I cannot stress to you how much I appreciate you joining as well and sharing your insights today. And what we're going to talk about is a big subject. It's communication between facilities and executive leadership. And really, how do you get buy-in from executive leadership and really communicate and build that trust and that relationship? And where it starts here is I always talk about the executive roles and then the day-to-day for the facilities maintenance operations roles, but a lot of times they've got really different priorities and where it also comes into play is limited visibility from what executive leadership's goals are to what's actually happening on the ground out in the field. And how do you get that feedback? So executive leadership, a lot of that comes down to vision. It's the long-term growth, the big financial issues within an organization or challenges within an organization, or even what's the strategies moving forward with an organization. But also it's really leadership within an organization. Whereas in facilities, it's day to day. It's boots on the ground. People are in the field. They're fixing stuff, constant repairs, preventative maintenance, safety, and also just maintaining the building. But a lot of times, again, there's a disconnect, and a lot of times senior leadership doesn't understand the roles and what all facilities touches. So with that, let me open it up to our panel. So how do you explain? Let's start with Eric. How do you explain facilities needs to leadership in a way that really connects them at Space Center Houston?
Absolutely. Thank you. That it's a good question. And it's always the recurring question, right? It is how do you get everybody on board? Because what we're doing as facilities executives is you feel like you're always fighting to make sure that you get what's needed to support the bigger picture. And that kind of goes back to answering your question, which is, how do I present to the group? Within our executive leadership team, you bring in when I'm in there with my colleagues, it is presenting what needs to be taken care of. I point out the stuff. We have a 30-year-old building, so immediately it's time for a refresh. And when I talk about a refresh or handling everything that's deferred, you get down to the numbers. Immediately get to the numbers. No one wants to hear about an RTU. No one wants to know about a chiller. They only want explanations, right, of what those things are. What they want to know is what is the guest experience impact? And so I will start with the guest experience impact. And then what is our revenue impact if we have to close certain galleries, etc. And then when I go in, it's immediately saying, hey, I've got a 3-year strategic plan. I've got this roadmap. I've already got it set out. Here's our CapEx that we're going to do over the next 3 years. Here's our immediate need. Here are the needs that we will hit in 27, 28, etc. But also, too, we're enhancing the guest experience. What we're bringing to the guest is new technology. We're getting a fresher look. We want everything to be inviting. And so what I always do is I start with the numbers. Like, here is the per cap impact per every person that comes in. We get 1.1 million people through these doors annually. So here's those direct impacts. Then I take it to, this is for every dollar we have deferred is become $5 in capital. And so to stop that trend from these recurring issues, these are the things we need to hit. And then finally, the last piece is, guys, we don't want to expand this campus to show old building, new building. Everything needs to be integrated, not just visually, but through our systems.
Mhm. And Nico, I'm curious with Holden Gardens too. What are some of the ways that you found success in discussing leadership facilities needs?
I think a lot of what Eric said rings true. Being a museum, we're in the same boat. But I think it's a very true thing. You've really got to focus on guest experience first and foremost. So, you know, outside of life and safety, which are usually really easy sells if there's a life and safety issue, we focus on the guest experience. And it's sad though, because in one regard, you put so much focus on the front of house that the back of house does suffer. Because if you walk into some of the staff areas, they don't look great. I'm not going to lie, because you're putting so much emphasis on the galleries and on the public areas. But you also have to remind everybody that your reputation is also on the line. We recently had a situation where there was something that we just barely avoided becoming a disaster right before a large wedding. We host a lot of weddings. Like throughout the summer months, we have weddings usually every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we have corporate events throughout the week. And the last thing you want is your reputation to be tarnished because you tried to save a couple of bucks and tried to defer something for a little bit too long. And that's a big thing. So, like, a lot of times if I can't get it sold any other way, I have to sit back and say, hey, look, do you really want to be the guy that didn't sign off on this line item that then cost this bride her dream wedding? And now all of a sudden we're the ones that are dealing with the fallout of that when it's all over on every wedding website. And she's saying, don't go there. I had a horrible experience. And usually you kind of get everyone to sit back in the chair and think about it for a second, scratch their chin and say, you know what, you're right. Let's spend the money. Let's just go ahead and get it done.
Well, and talking about guest experience, same thing crosses over to patient experience too. And you don't want to be that hospital that's known for not having excellent care. And David, share a little bit of the way from the executive standpoint too. How do you like to consume the information and have information shared with you?
Well, I would tell you to start with, if you've seen one hospital, you've seen one hospital. And the way the executives function with system to system, hospital to hospital is often different. So just as if you were planning a presentation in some format, understand your audience, understand what the priorities are. I mean, the financial position of the hospital at a given point is also a big driver in how decisions are made. Typically, you're going to fall back to things like patient safety, staff safety, because there are a number of potential hazards that are unique to hospital environments. So patient safety and staff safety are typically the priorities. But I would tell you in terms of long-term success, we want to avoid getting into last-minute decision-making if at all possible. Things happen, pipes break, fires start, all sorts of things happen. But anytime you get in front of the leadership team, anything that you can do to project what's going to happen, and I'm not asking you for $500,000 on the spot. I can say, hey, look, we can do this 3 months from now or 6 months from now, but I'm going to need this down the road. So understand your audience, understand the priorities and what it is that your boss your leader is confronting at the moment, and try to shape the message to fit that narrative.
I love that because again, read the room, know the room too. And I was talking to somebody just literally yesterday, and he shared a story that's basically this. It's creating a visual or painting the picture for somebody who doesn't know facilities and really understanding, helping them to easily understand. I'm a visual person. And he said most of the people that he goes in and speaks with in senior leadership roles, they don't have the first clue what an AHU is, let alone if it breaks, what happens. And he said he really started painting a picture for him. And it was something like this. It was, here's the AHU in that picture, but this is what's impacted. If that AHU that's 10 years past the end of life goes down, we lose two ORs. He said, I don't even have to tell him the actual numbers, what he does, but he said, if they lose those two ORs, they know what revenue's lost because of that. But it's not just about the revenue. To Nico's point, it's impact on the person. That could be that wedding, or it could be the patient, it could be the person who visits the site. Doesn't matter. It's impact on the people who come to the place too. And I loved that it was very visual, and it's cut and dry. It's if it goes down, this is the impact. There's no gray area there. And with that too, though, the next phase here is what facilities problems or risks are toughest to really get leadership to pay attention to before something goes sideways. And let's start with Nico on this one.
Ironically for us, it's not so much the public facing things, it's more the private things. Kind of, as I mentioned earlier about the staff areas, we are at an impasse where we've taken on so much staff in recent years. Our organization's grown exponentially, and we are now finally at the point where we are in the planning phase to build a new visitor center at the Arboretum campus, to double the size of our science and research building. But in the interim, we got to the point where we had people stacked up on top of each other. And it got so bad at one point where I get another request from HR saying, "Hey, we have another hire that's starting next week. They're like, you have to find desk space for him." And I'm like, where? Like, where do you want, like, unless you start getting me like bunk bed desks and we start stacking people vertically, like, I don't know where else to put people in this building. And it's not that I hadn't raised the warning signal because I had. I kept telling people, look, we are a critical mass. Like, the best space planner in the world can only work with the space that they have, period. I can't invent space. So it did get to the point where we got to literally, we ended up having to buy a trailer. We ended up buying a classroom trailer
Mhm.
and putting it on the side of our building and putting all of the interns and seasonals in that trailer because we ran out of space in the primary building. And it got to the point where we completely ran out of space before they finally were like, okay, you're right. What do we do? And I'm like, well, I'm glad you asked because here's a bunch of quotes for lease versus buy of getting trailers. Here's how much it'll cost to bring it in. Here's how much it's going to cost to wire it. Here's how much it's going to cost to plumb it into the primary building. So I had everything ready to go. And then they finally let me pull the trigger and do it. But it literally took us coming down to that point where there was people just standing around with nowhere to even put their bag down before they finally made the decision to, add that temporary space.
I think it's space is always a premium, especially when it's the back of the house like you were talking about. And David, what are ways that you found success in really sharing the risks, sharing that information with leadership?
Well, at the risk of being repetitive, the knowing your audience thing is extremely important. When I was looking at your previous slide with all the colors and graphics and those sorts of things, it reminds me of a number of years ago. I worked for a CEO who was actually colorblind, and I had to talk to people, new people who would come in and put presentations together for the CEO. You have to make those colors more distinguishable. A light red and a dark red maybe isn't going to get there. It has to be, different, significantly different for him to be able to really see and understand your slide. But the toughest things to get across across the finish line really often are the big dollar items. Obviously, those are obvious things. And so again, planting that seed and understanding the things that are coming down the road. If you have sort of a master plan that you can lay out and say, next year we have an HVAC system that will be toward quote unquote end of life. The year after that, we have another, $100,000 piece of equipment. And if you can lay those things out, it also helps your leadership trust you that you have a handle on what's happening and you're not coming to them with last minute requests. The other part I would throw in there is to define what end of life means. We have equipment in hospitals that the manufacturer, the vendor will tell you that it's end of life after, I don't know, 5 years. But there's a maintenance plan that maybe you can buy that's less expensive in the short run, if that's where the emphasis is, that will help you get by in the meantime. True end of life in our line of work means that the vendor will no longer work on that piece of equipment, or you can no longer find parts, those sorts of things. That's what we truly look at as end of life. So, the planning, the understanding of the terms and things and building that trust goes a long way toward getting those difficult problems across the line.
I appreciate that. And Eric, share your insights on, how do you convey the risks and how do you what are the toughest ways to get leadership to pay attention?
No, it's you know, try not to be redundant from what David and Nico have said because I feel his pain, Nico's pain with space. We've grown very, very quick, and we also are out of real estate. And to David's point too, it's all about the visuals. And so for me, the plan of attack, if you will, has always been, hey, we have planned this thing out. I mentioned the 3-year roadmap. Want to show everything that what we're doing. We're the content expert, and they're relying on us to bring them the best solutions with a plan A, plan B. But at the end of the day, for us, it is what is going to be the impact to our visitors here. And so I always go back to that because goes back to always the visitor experience. So when you lay out the plan and then you structure it, and from an engineering mind, I'm like, oh, it's all there. I don't know why you can't see it. So it comes back to getting it to in layman's terms, putting it in a visual, take that visual and then color code it. That's what we do right now. I'll give the example of we're working on our utilities right now for additional expansion that we're going through. And we have zoned it in such a way, if we address X, this will impact, say, our tram service from our site over to NASA. And here's those impacts. And then with
Uh-oh.
that plan, we
Did we
show,
freeze?
pardon?
Oh, I think
Something.
we're good.
Okay. No, but at the end of the day, for us, it is showing that we planned it out. Here's what we're going to do after hours. Here's what we're doing through business hours. And here is, if we do these following things, here's our cost reduction and OpEx moving forward. If we're spending the same money on the same recurring costs, we need to get to the root cause analysis of what's happening. Here's the initial investment we've got. Here's the ROI. And then at the end of the day, here's what we're going to do, reallocating that staff that say they're working on the same RTU weekly. Now that person's time is reallocated to another challenge that we need to address.
I love that I'm still hearing that common theme. It's communicating, communicating,
100%.
communicating, communicating, and talking. All three of you have had this constant communication theme, and I love that because I think at the end of the day, it eliminates a lot of those potential surprises. And David, let's start with you on this one and share a time when a building or facility issue had a real impact on daily operations or even costs.
Well, this may be a bit of a simplistic example, but in my active duty Air Force days, I was at Keesler Air Force Base when Hurricane Katrina came on land. So there were so many things and so much expense required to bring our hospital there back online that you truly had to have a plan. You truly had to set priorities because it was physically and financially impossible to do everything at once. So there was immediate impact to the things that you did and our ability to provide care for that for the base and that community and our people deploying and all those sorts of things. So this was everything from typically if you came to a leader and said, we have an elevator down, that would be, an eye opener. We have to do something with that immediately. Elevators were way back on the list. It was things like opening up ORs, providing clinic space. HVAC was huge because it was extremely humid. It was during the summer, all of those sorts of things. So in terms of decision-making, prioritization that had an immediate impact, those Hurricane Katrina days immediately come to mind.
Yeah, that's a big one too. I've talked to multiple people over the years, like even in at Tulane University too, where they were housing people during the storm. People at the arena, obviously, or the big stadium, I should say, New Orleans too. I mean, it was the way that people came together and boy, you want to pressure test your system. That's how you pressure test your system. You'll find anything that potentially will break. Let's jump into this with Nico too. Share an incident or share something that's happened within your organization too, Nico, where it's been an issue and it had a real impact.
Well, back in August of 2024, we had a major superstorm roll through the Cleveland area that ended up producing 5 tornadoes in about an hour and a half time span. One of those hit the corner of the Arboretum campus and thankfully went away from the campus, that towards the center of campus, but it was close enough that like where it touched down and then lifted off and touched down and lifted off, it just left a significant trail of damage in its wake. It was a major, major widespread storm incident. It's something that Northeast Ohio is not really used to because we're not really part of Tornado Alley, although the tornado seems to be shifting more in our direction in recent years. Lucky us. Um, but it really opened our eyes to a lot of vulnerabilities that we had. The campus was just utterly decimated the next day. And I live about 15 minutes from campus. It took me almost 2 hours even just to get here. I mean, every road between the campus and here. So, you're talking, this wasn't just isolated to us. I mean, this was widespread. But I'm on the phone with the police. I'm on the phone with Lake County Emergency Management Association. I'm trying to figure out what's going on from a campus-wide level. There's no cell service. There's no power. There's no nothing. I've got people that I'm asking to come to work that can't even take a hot shower at home because they don't even have power at their own house. And I'm asking a lot of people at that point. I'm telling people, look, if you can come in, great. If you can't, I totally understand. I mean, people are dealing with a lot of devastation at home as well. But it was a disaster. And it was one of those things where I just had to sit back and hand everybody a pad of paper and a pencil and say, this is what we're going to do. We don't have power. We don't have phones. We don't have communication. We don't have anything. We're basically primitive at this point. We're going to break out into groups. We pulled out a map of the campus. Everyone's going to go out teams of two. You're going to take a section of the campus. You're going to go out. You're not to fix anything. Go out, report back. I need you back here every 2 hours. I need to make sure everyone's safe. I need to at least make sure we need to start inventorying what's wrong. Once we went through that step of the process, then like we reconvened that afternoon, we started saying, okay, what's what? What can we fix? What's just destroyed where it's going to take months to repair? What can we get reopened? What's our plan? How quickly can we get the campus back online? And after a lot of hard decisions and 4 really, really hard days of people being here day and night, we were able to make the plan that we had the core of the campus reopened to the public within 2 weeks. It took over a year to get all the damage cleaned up, but at least like from an operational standpoint, we had 80% of the campus back online within 2 weeks. And from the public's perspective, yeah, they might have seen tarps on roofs and stuff like that, but at least we were functioning. We were back in business because it was hard. It was hard. It was really hard. It wasn't Hurricane Katrina hard, but for us, it was really hard.
And Eric, share your insights on how an issue happened and the impact on daily operations and really costs.
Absolutely, yeah. And I can give a real-time 6 weeks ago experience. We're working on upgrading utilities. I briefly mentioned it earlier. And one of our areas we really need to address is the water pressure coming into the facility, especially as we add on more square footage. We knew that 4 of our primary valves that control fire water and water into the facility needed to be addressed. They're over 30 years old. We having issues with them. And we were connecting our new education facility that we're finishing up and opens Monday. And we opened up the pressure valve. We exposed it and we're 8 feet down and we knew there was a leak. Actually, what we found out was the river clay, or actually not river clay, excuse me, where I previously was river clay, but here it was clay that contained that valve. So when we exposed it, we had an issue. We dropped all water pressure to the building. We had 5,000 guests here, and that water pressure dropped. We had to close for half a day. We don't close. We are at 363. We only close Thanksgiving and Christmas Day. That's it. And so for us to have that issue, it was huge. So it was a quick triage. Unfortunately, once we fixed that overnight, a day later, we lost the other valves that we had planned to replace. And we lost 2 of the 4. And what we decided to do, I was like, guys, let's pause. Let's look at this. Let's evaluate this. If we are officially going to be closed for an entire day. This impacts revenue. This impacts the guest experience. This impacts staff. So while we have this exposed, let's do all 4 and let's get it. And that we had to change. We had a quick triage. We had to go on a boil order with utilities. We, with that triage, I had guys going to Home Depot, all of the locations, getting flats and flats of water to provide both our staff and our guests. And at the end of the day, we were able to get ahead of it, but we also had to change schedules. So someone was here 24/7. We had a swing shift the entire time. And myself and others in safety, we were here 36 continuous hours to make sure this thing got up and got running. It was one of those deferred maintenance components and also aging components that had to be addressed. But yeah, 6 weeks ago, that was an experience, and I'm proud of the team. It was one of those that you had to give everybody a pat on the back. There's only so much pizza and things you can provide somebody, right? To say thank you. And at the end of the day, we have a thankless job, but at the end of the day, myself and the executive team were appreciative of what these folks went through. Fortunately, I have not gone through a hurricane like others have gone through. We are in the hurricane season and we are in close to the coast. And so sure that experience will come. But this one, David, that was probably the best example we've got right now today.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately I live in Florida, and we're everybody's gearing up right now
Yeah.
because it's potentially going to be a bad season. And we talked offline about this, and I'm going to share this story because I actually just recorded a webinar with someone on this, and she shared this story. It was how quickly can something go sideways, and this is a school up in Chattanooga, and in 13 minutes they had a pipe burst. It was in one of their buildings. A pipe burst and cost $700,000 in 13 minutes. The guy who knew where the shutoff was on the other side of campus, massive campus, and you can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's like you said, Eric, with breaking, water mains breaking coming into a building too. In this case, 70,000 to 80,000 gallons of water in 13 minutes. I mean, that's not a leak, that's
Yeah.
bad. And
Mhm.
things in facilities can turn sideways really quickly. And I'm gonna jump ahead here, and David, let's start with you on this one. How does having accurate building information really help when asking for budget and asking for that funding and support from leadership?
Well, I would go back to our recurring theme of communication. I would start with having a master plan. And what I refer to as a master plan is your larger the expenditures that you can plan out. Obviously, you're never going to be able to plan for that sort of a flood and that sort of a situation. But if when I engage with new leadership for the first time, I'd like to see a master plan. I think we have 5 years left on our roof before we have to provide, additional funds for that. We have three HVACs in the facility, and each one has this much life, we believe, left. These are the repercussions for not doing that. These are the options for investing that. And I tend to be a under promise, over deliver sort of guy. So be very conservative on dates you provide, on costs, provide a range and give yourself some cushion in that cost range. And in the process of all that, you're building credibility. And so when you get to a point where you really have to engage senior leadership with last minute issues that you can't necessarily plan, if you've built that credibility over a period of time, the pushback is typically far less because they've seen your plan, they understand what that you have control over these things or don't have control over certain things. So that is a huge piece of this. And just making sure that again that the boss understands a lot of these things, because somebody who does what I do is not going to typically think about where the shutoff valves are. If you can lay out those kinds of plans and say, hey, look, we've got three guys that are trained to do A, B, and C. Again, it helps build your credibility. It helps show that you have a plan, because I am not in my office thinking about where the shutoff valve is if we have a flood.
I think that's fair. It's the day-to-day operations, that's facilities life, and but that's not leadership's life. So understanding that and being able to convey that, I think, is a big deal. And Eric, let's start with you on this one too. Let's kick it back over to you with regards to having accurate building information and what does that mean for you especially when you're going in asking for that budget?
No, absolutely. Historically here, everything was I would call the notebook an Excel spreadsheet, and and the those are great tools, but at the same time, we had no real data. And so I'll use HVAC as an example. We have 26 units. They're on the roof. We have a huge sun load, and and our maintenance has not been superb and over the years. And so my first effort was doing a commissioning effort to go through and determine what are we meeting the thresholds we need. It's humid in Houston. There is no getting around it. And we have artifacts. And so presenting those artifacts that have to meet the Smithsonian standards is where I start the conversation there. And then to something that David said is showing, for me, it is we didn't always have specialized staff. And so that has been my focus for the 15 months I've been here is specializing that staff, but not just one, showing that we have two or three people that are sitting on the bench ready to jump in if someone's on PTO, etc., or just flat out not available due to other issues. And it comes down to planning and showing the plan, showing the fiscal impact, showing what can happen if. And you don't, I'm with David, under promise over deliver, but also on the other side too, you don't want to freak anybody out. It's not a scare tactic. And if what you present is factual hard numbers and also just down to the core of it, the true statement of what's going on, transparency goes a long way. It is not a matter of pointing fingers. I have staff that are like, well, that's such and such decision he made 15 years ago. You know what? He's retired. He's gone. We're talking about today. And, it is looking to the future with a lot of this stuff. And when you show that you're future proofing, that you're looking to, anything that you do capital wise, it's going to help us in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. So we're not readdressing this issue again.
I love that. And Nico, share your experience too with having accurate building information. How's that helped you when you walk in there and into that board meeting, or you walk into your leadership and have to ask for that money to fix or to do that initiative?
It's really important for us. We have three unique campuses. They're all within about an hour drive of each other. I have about 4,000 acres of land that we manage, and just if you name it, we have one of them somewhere on one of these campuses. Like literally, every piece of equipment, every tool, every type of vehicle, everything known to man, we have it somewhere. So it's really, really important for us to have accurate knowledge of everything that we own, where it is, how does it work, how does it function, what happens if it goes down. Like one of the biggest examples I can give here at the Arboretum is this is a very rural campus. We're about an hour outside of Cleveland. We have our own private non-portable water system or I'm sorry, non-transient water system and our own sewer system. We have our own treatment plant on site. We have our own Class A operator on staff. We have to have redundancy because if he were to get sick or something were to happen to him, the EPA doesn't want to hear, oh, Ricky has a cold. He couldn't do his logs. We have to have redundancy, and we have to have redundancy for that redundancy. So we have contractors that will also come out weekly so that they're familiar with the campus and do checks, and they'll just audit his logs to make sure everything's good. So if we're in a situation where somebody's out, we have person B and person C on the ready, which is a lot of what my co-panelists have also made mention of. We've also gone through many, many reports over the years where we've had contractors come in and do, facilities envelopes assessments. Did we freeze? Looks like
No, I
okay.
think we're okay.
So for a second. But yeah, it's just you just got to keep on top of that stuff, and you just got to have all that information ready.
Yeah, I think you're right too. It comes down to being ready. You just got to be on the ready always. And I'm going to kind of jump around here a little bit with the panelists too, because I know I want to be cognizant of time. But Eric, share a little bit of a backstory. And I know with regards to I show this on my screen for one reason. It's access in the field. And I actually interviewed somebody on my podcast today about this. And he said we need to stop thinking of technology as something other than a tool. And you show this from the standpoint of, the facilities teams in the field, they're accessing stuff all the time, but they're fixing stuff all the time. But a lot of times they can't access a lot of the stuff that to do their job. It's the work order. It's the what do I need to order? It's where is the thing? Where's my drawings for the building? It's all that access to all that information and identifying where is it, what is it in the field is in their pocket. And it's a phone or a tablet. It's a tool. And being able to access all that information is a big deal. And I think the mindset, I'm seeing a huge shift over time, and it's like the steering the Titanic, I think, to a certain degree, but a
Mhm.
lot of organizations are starting to really recognize, wait a minute, my team's running back and forth, trying to find stuff to do their job. I need to give them the tools to do their job. And with that, let me start with Eric on this one, and it's share a success story where leadership really supported you in a facility improvement or an investment.
Absolutely. I can go to the platform we're using right now. We had years of paper documents, years. And one was in this electrical closet. This is over here in the vaults with artifacts. You know, it's kind of like you go in your attic and you find you're like, oh, there it is. And they were all over the place. And so our first step was centralizing all those, digitizing those. And then I invested in tablets for everybody in the field. And then I worked with IT to make sure we had the heat map that was strong enough for Wi-Fi so that we can cover the 95 acres. And, a lot of these guys, they know the tricks of the trade. They've been here 15, 20 years. And so they know that water valve takes 4 turns and to shut it off. They know that this boiler valve, if you turn off this section, you need to open this section. And once we started documenting all those, as we onboarded new staff, we were able to say, here's this tool. We have X amount of valves that have to be addressed in these zones. And then we have now color coded the maps, zoned everything out. And we've taken everything from valves to electrical closets. We put the panel schedules. We started cleaning up, the old days of grabbing the Sharpie and writing it on, and they're like, this is Jimmy's office. Well, that's actually Office 101. So, we renumbered the building and tried to standardize everything. It was a lot of legwork to centralize everything. But now that we are on the other side of the info dump, I find that the team is so much more efficient. And they will not let. I'm not allowed to have a radio. You don't want me to have a radio. And I'm grounded from the radio system. And so, I did grab a radio one day, and you didn't hear those same calls over and over and over. Hey, where's this? Where's this? And so now that they have the tablets, they have a system where they see everything. Because as we have been expanding and putting on additions or doing remodeling, you don't know what's behind that wall because there's never been proper documentation. So now they can pull up the drawings from 92, 93 and go, okay, this has X. Now we know that is going to be behind the wall. How are we going to address it? And we find the efficiency behind that because now we have new guys that get on the roof to work on an HVAC unit. They pull up the plate data. They know exactly what kind of filters we need, et cetera, et cetera. We find that, you talked about, well, I'll call it parallel parking the World War II ship downtown. It introducing tech has been hard for this group. because they're old school. But now that they have the tools, they understand what we're doing now. They understand, that we are trying to make them efficient. So at the end of the day, they're not going home and worrying about RTU 6. They're not going home worrying about, well, you name it. And so that for us has been the success on digitizing our work system and workflow.
I think a lot of orgs struggle with that. It's
Oh,
exactly what you said. I'm a mess. I had multiple conversations just this morning about this with other orgs, and it's identifying where is it, what is it, and then having all that legacy knowledge
yep.
captured so that you know, what I loved about what you just said there too is, it's the next person on the bench. They should
Hmm.
have access to it just like the person who's been there for a long time.
Hmm.
And I think where a lot of orgs struggle with is they get into those bucket silos
Hmm.
and this is the guy who knows this or this is the gal who knows that, and at the end of the day everybody should know it. Everybody have access. And let me go back to Nico on this one, and it's share a success story, where leadership really supported you, and especially when it came to investments on different things.
Well, ironically, looking at this picture right here, which is the Botanical Gardens campus, kind of in the forefront there, you can see the original 1960s mid-century modern part of the building, and then in the back is the biomes, which were added in 2001. Off to the right, what you can't see is another large addition that was put on in 2001 as well. When they did that, they did thankfully do things that they should have done throughout the building. They removed the asbestos, they did all those types of things. So thankfully, when I came in, I had clean reports. But the older part of the building, they kind of just massaged it. They didn't really renovate it fully. And about a year back, the discussion came up that they wanted to redo the cafe, which is kind of in the older part of the building. And they gave me a budget, and I kind of laughed. And I was like, you can't do a third of what you want to do for the budget that you have. It just happened.
Oh,
Oh,
we got you.
okay. My whole screen just went black for a second. I thought I lost everybody.
No, you're good.
But I knew how important this was to the cafe. I'm sorry, to the organization, and I knew how much revenue the cafe could potentially make. So I sat down and I really dug deep into the numbers with the cafe, into each piece of equipment, into everything. And I went back to leadership. I report directly to the COO, and I said, if you want to do this to the level that I think you want to do this, it's going to cost X. I said, but if we spend that, I said, this is what I think that the potential return on investment could be. I said, sales should go up to here. This should go up to here. I says, the event, because we redesigned it to be a multi-purpose space, it only originally functioned as a cafe. Um, like we did redesign the space so that the cafe could be converted after hours into bar space. So when we have private events and weddings, we put a full automation system in for the lights and for the HVAC, and you could completely change the ambiance of the space. And the final result was awesome. And it's actually exceeded even the expectations that I had for the space. And, it just proved once again that like with the investment, sorry, my computer decided right now it wants to put in an update. So it keeps flashing on my screen. That's why it keeps blacking out. It keeps saying you need to reboot your
Hey,
device.
that's real life, Nico, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it doesn't matter how well you plan,
That's
some
right.
unannounced update will always just happen right in the middle of something.
Oh my goodness.
But to just sum up my thought, like, going back and really being able to paint the picture, I was able to get them to nearly double the budget for the cafe renovation because I was able to prove the use case that it would pay for itself. And we're about 7 months into the renovated cafe, and so far it has been paying for itself. And we fully expect to see our payback within 2 years, is what we expected when we did the renovations.
That's awesome. I'm going to jump ahead here too, and David, let's start with you on this one. It's the after everything we talked about, and again, I'm hearing this theme of communication and honestly collaboration, and it's communicating with leadership and breaking down so many of those silos. And I love this picture that's on screen, and it really comes down to communication and all different departments really coming together to communicate and share needs and updates. And what's one simple piece of advice that you hope that people will take away in from this conversation in how to better explain facilities needs and get support from leadership?
I would really go back to where I started, which is understanding priorities. Uh, being aware of the environment that you're in. I have been in hospitals who had only had 60 days cash on hand. I've had others who were maybe had a year's worth of cash on hand. And so how you spend money incrementally, big picture, whatever the case, really goes back to what the priorities are. Staff safety, patient safety, those sorts of things, but truly having a real understanding of your environment and how you communicate with your leader. Our CEO in my current organization does a great job of having monthly meetings with the entire team, helping them understand what our finances are at that point, where our quality may need a tweak here or there, the different things that are happening. And it's imperative for leaders mid-level leaders who sit through those sorts of briefings, to take that back and really analyze it and not just sort of check the box, I went to the meeting, but to take that back, analyze what was said, and understand how that affects your department.
I love that. And Eric, let's jump over to you.
Yeah, the one thing that you got to keep in mind is, you don't want to operate in a silo as a division. And, you know the problem, you know that X, Y, and Z needs to be addressed. But to really get the full picture, and one thing I've implemented here is cross functionality, not just with other departments within an organization, but diversifying and collaborating with my division in total. We cover everything from facilities engineering. We got custodial grounds. I have mechanical, and there's and safety and security. Bringing everybody together in a collaborative effort internally will get the full picture. And then once you get the full picture from everybody, you'll find that somebody they may be a mechanic, but at the end of the day, they used to work in the oil and gas field. So they know how to handle large pipes, etc. Then you can get that full picture. And also, I make sure when we go through any big capital improvement or in capital improvement pitch, if you will, I bring in the right people within our own division. They're the content experts. I'm going to bring in our safety and security director. He's going to give it from the safety side. If we do these X, Y, and Z, then here is the safety impacts for both our employees, which is just as important as our guests. Or I may bring in our capital project director, and he would say, we can do these projects concurrently to cut down cost. And it is just about communication and collaboration. And for us, 100% transparency. Sometimes, it can be a hard question, and there's going to be a lot of whys and how did we get here? Why are we here? And being prepared for those. And when you're prepared for those and you come with a full picture, come with a full plan, not just about the fiscal aspect, but from an operational aspect, you'll see success.
Love that. And Nico, share your insights.
Well, I like to tell people it's time to bring the back of the house to the front of conversation.
Oh, I love that.
Exactly.
Because I think that in our world, I think it's some of the truest words that can be spoken. I think that for so long, facilities was kind of like the place that people hid in the back. As long as the paint looked good, as long as the air conditioning was working, nobody really came looking for us. And I think that's really changed over the years. I really think that facilities have become very data driven in every organization, especially ours. I can't speak for everybody, but the metrics and the values, and you have to justify everything that you do every single day. So if you don't have the data to back it up, if you don't have the knowledge to back it up, and like Eric said, sometimes that might be leaning on the mechanic or leaning on the janitor, because sometimes they are the subject matter expert in whatever thing that you're trying to get through. And I don't have a problem pulling those people into the conversation and saying, here, listen to this guy. He's the one running the floor machine every day. He can tell you why it doesn't work right. But you really have to justify everything that you do, because every organization across the board, especially true in nonprofits and museums, they're struggling for money, and you really have to justify every dime that you're spending. So if you can't make a use case for what it is that you're trying to do and sell what it is you're trying to sell to senior leadership, it's not going to happen, because they're just going to look at it as a line item. You have to tell that story. You have to use those infographics. You have to paint that picture with a big brush. I might get a little more slack because being in museums, The nice thing about being in museums versus a lot of other industries is that the facility itself is just as much a part of the experience and is just as much a part of the art as the art itself. So if you have a
Mhm.
gallery and you have artwork hanging on the wall, getting that lighting right, getting that air just right, getting all those settings just right is crucial to the experience. So we do have a little easier time getting a seat at the table than somebody might who runs like, I don't know, like a warehouse or something like that. But you still have to be able to paint that picture and you still have to be able to make your case.
I
Mhm.
love that, and that leads me to this. It's a great segue. It's facilities needs a seat at that table, and I show this image for this. It's look at all the different departments. You've got finance, you've got IT, you've got the CEO and the COO, and you may have other departments in there, but having a seat at that table is invaluable, and you having a voice. And I agree with what Nico said, and well, all of you said. It's being heard and pulling that back of the house to the front of the house. You guys keep the building running. You keep the building functioning, and that impacts every single department. And it's getting that seat at the table so you're again you're seen not just as a cost center. You're a strategic partner. And then also helps build that trust. It's that transparency. So leadership, again, they're not necessarily going to know everything about facilities, but you can educate them. You can hit the language that they do understand so that you can formulate and paint that picture for them, but also build relationships with the departments. That's finance, operations, leadership, in HR, IT, all those different departments. But you translate that what facilities needs are to those different groups, and then I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with other departments where they're like, you know what, I could also use this for that. Or
Mhm.
even, and I've heard the flip side of that is, oh, you're buying that software or you're doing that thing too. We do too. And then come to find out that they're because there's no communication, one didn't know the other one already had it. So again,
Mhm.
it's a lot of those types of situations, but at the end of the day, everybody should be, singing from the same play, singing from that same song. And
Mhm.
everybody should be able to access the information they need. Full transparency, everybody on the same page, everybody's able to access the stuff that they need. So, Indira, let me flip it back over to you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you all for a great discussion. Before we move into the questions, we just wanted to share a practical one pager, the executive facilities conversation framework. This is something we created based on conversations we've had with facilities teams about how to better communicate operational needs. Just scan the code, or I'm going to drop the link here. You can just request your copy. We'll send that to you. But we're also going to be developing an actual business case playbook based on these fantastic insights from our panelists today. So keep an eye out on your email for that. That's going to be a really good playbook. So David, I'm going to go ahead and jump into questions. The first question I have right now is, we've had a lot of leadership turnover, and it feels like we constantly have to start over and re-explain our priorities. What has helped you build stronger relationships with new leadership teams?
Yeah, let me throw this one over to David to answer that one.
Um, if your leadership is turning over at a regular rate in that way, I would have a template that I utilize over and over and over again. And it also provides you an opportunity to ask questions, because if there's leadership turnover, there may be changes in priorities.
Mhm.
So I would have a template of items that you see as the 4 or 5 most important things, no more than that on the early conversations, 4 or 5 key priorities, and then what you see as the priorities, and then understand the new leader's priorities.
I talked to somebody the other day, and he said one of the questions he's had multiple turnovers from the C-suite, and he said he's got a standard set of questions when he has that first meeting with them, and I loved what his first question was that he asked, and he's had four different leader changes since he's been there in 10 years. And I said, "Oh my goodness." I said, "What do you ask him?" And he said, "The first question I ask him is, how can I best communicate with you?" I
Mhm.
love that. I
Mhm.
absolutely love that. And he said most of the time it's a cadence of meetings or something like that. But just the fact that he's asking that question right out of the gate
Mhm.
is to me is speaks volumes for the way he's understood what works and what didn't work because he said before I didn't ask that question. I just assumed. And he said you can never assume.
Mhm.
All right, then next question I have here, from your experience, how can facility managers best lean on their vendors' technical knowledge to strengthen their recommendations and gain buy-in from leadership teams?
Oh, Eric, you want to field that one?
Yeah, I'll take that one on. Um, what we do with our external vendors that help us with very technical components within the facility is it is not just a preventive maintenance contract or anything of that nature when they come in and check a box and come in and do work. We also add a training component to their contracts. We have them our crew will shadow these contractors so that we are even the backup for our third party contractors. And then, some give a little pushback because they think you're taking money out of their pocket. However, what we're telling them is we can triage on your behalf. So when you get here for an emergency, you're ready to hit the ground running. And that's how we utilize third party contractors right now.
Got it. Okay, great.
Great. Next question. After an emergency, leadership wanted answers immediately. Sometimes there is a long, there is sometimes, excuse me, sometimes there is a lot of finger pointing before something changes. I started documenting after action items to help us learn. How do you recommend sharing this info with leadership committees who often have their own agendas?
Oh, Nico, you want to take that one? I think I would assume that this would have something similar to with what you just went through with the storm.
Yeah, so it's funny because we've used the term let's perform an autopsy, and we've done
Oh,
that before for things that have failed or things that have gone well. But after the fact, we've gotten together as a team with the different department heads, directors, managers, etc., and we sat down and we've gone piece by piece when we've had something major happen. What worked, what didn't work, where did it fail, at what point did it die? And that's the thing is like like finger pointing aside, and yes, there's always going to be some of that. Okay,
Mhm.
we're humans. Okay, but like you really got to try to quell that because I've been in a room where there's people just, well, he said this and he said that and blah blah blah, and I'm like, it's inconsequential. Like, let's just figure out
Mhm.
where the breakdown happened. Like, if anyone's familiar with Traction, it's a great book. The EOS model, but the IDS, identify, discuss, and then solutions. But like the discussion part is the smallest part. You're supposed to identify and you're supposed to work towards solutions. So that's the thing. When we do these autopsy reports, we all get together in a room and it's like you can have 3 minutes to air your grievances, but that's it. Like we're then going to move on and we're going to figure out what the solution is because what we all are trying to avoid is this from happening again. I don't want to be in this room again in 6 months having the same conversation. We're in this room in
Mhm.
6 months from now having a different conversation for a different failure. That's fine. I expect that. But our goal is to do this autopsy, figure out why it died, what went wrong, and how do we avoid it from happening again. And I'll walk out of the room signing a document, a memorandum of understanding that we all agree that in the future, this is how we will handle the situation.
I love that. That's great.
Great. Another question I have here is we don't have our equipment or shutoffs mapped. What is the software you were showing during the presentation?
Oh, that's us, Arc Facilities. Yeah, I could take that one. Yeah, we actually map out and we do site walks and field verify what's really out there. And I think that's at the end of the day is a lot of organizations struggle with that, especially if they've got older sites or they've got buildings that have undergone multiple renovations over the years. But back to what Eric said earlier too, I was thinking about when you replace those mains, Eric. I'm
Mhm.
thinking, you know a lot of organizations don't even have a way to document that stuff when it's dug up. They just rebury it and move on.
Mhm.
And I think at the end of the day, information is only as good as you can capture it and keep it and maintain it because, like you said, it's the next person up on the bench, coming
Mhm.
up behind them needs access to that stuff too.
Great. Do you have one final question? It is for Eric. It says, for the Houston Nassau Bay collaboration of sharing the location and space, how do you bring the community to join the success of the events?
Hmm.
Oh, that's a good one. Um, um, in regards to Let me get a clarifying question. So I want to be able to how we connect all our entities with the community. Is that what the question is?
Beatrice, if you're still on, let us know. Otherwise, I'm going to send this question. Oh, she says correct.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We have how we do that is we do have an interesting partnership. We are the educational arm for Johnson Space Center. We're their visitor and education center, but also we're a STEM center. We're an education component where we have camps like right now. School got out and the camps are here. So we are widespread within the Greater Houston area, and we're reaching out to all the schools. The Houston Independent School District is one of them. And we reach out to these school districts we're trying to bring the next generation up through STEM. We're trying to introduce not just space, but the tech behind space. And how we do co-events with NASA. I mean, we had the Artemis 2 launch. We had those two brought together, and we have a very strong marketing team. I mean, we have a strong marketing team, and they are the ones that go out and really reach out to all aspects, not just within Texas, but also outside of Texas. We have a lot of international programs currently, educational programs that we reach out to. And from the community standpoint, myself and others I'm part of a group that deals with sustainability for the city of Houston. How can we then introduce that to both Space Center Houston and our grounds and also Johnson Space Center? And we also try to showcase those things from water reclamation to wildlife management. We have a lot of wildlife within our grounds. And it is how do we bring in the right groups? And we have a strong partnership with the community itself, and a lot of ours is word of mouth, social media, things of that nature.
Awesome. And for the audience, feel free to connect with Eric, Nico, and David on LinkedIn. You guys can find them there if you have any more questions. We have run out of time today. If we didn't get to your questions, we'll follow up with you individually. And we will be sending a recording out. And again, we will be putting together a business case playbook based on the insights today. I think that's going to be a really great piece. Also want to tell everybody, please listen to the Facility Voices podcast. I believe all of our panelists have been guests, right, David?
And they've been awesome. They shared their career journeys and experiences in facilities. It's really great.
Awesome. And David, if you want to just go back one slide for anybody who missed the QR code, if they want to scan this, that way they can get this little one pager that we put together. And so that is all we have today. I want to thank the panelists, Nico, David, Eric, for sharing your best practices and insights. And David, thank you so much for moderating a great discussion. And thank you so much to the audience for spending your time with us today. And we hope to see you at the next webinar. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.